6 o'clock, and we do have quite a few of our CAG members here this evening. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know it's a busy time of year. We really appreciate you joining for our Community Advisory Group meeting for the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project. Also, just want to say hello. We have several folks from the community who are also listening in. My name is Laura Listener Miller, and I will be facilitating tonight's meeting. We encourage those of you who are listening in to email in your comments, questions at any time to the project team. We have been receiving a number of comments in our project inbox, and we're been passing those along to our project team and encourage you to continue sending us that feedback, especially after you hear the information this evening. Also, a reminder that we are recording this meeting and we will be posting the video on the project website for anyone who couldn't attend live. So we have a full meeting this evening. I did want to mention that Hadley Rodero, our community engagement lead, was unable to join us this evening. I know Hadley's been very engaged in this process. So I just wanted to mention that in case you were looking for her, and also just introduce John Vizina. John leads Washington State Ferry's external relations, and he has this camera there on if you can see him. So we might bring him into the conversation today. Thanks for being here, John. Okay, we also have, I know this is old hat by now, our Zoom instructions, so just friendly reminders for our CAG members. We will use the raise your hand feature and ask you to come off of mute when you would like to speak. So we do have a few times throughout the presentation this evening where we will pause to take questions and hear your feedback. And then lastly, for my part, this is just an overview of our agenda. We are really looking forward to sharing the results of the level 3 screening process during tonight's meeting. We'll start with an overview of that before reviewing the results, and then of course want to hear your thoughts on that as well. And with that, it's just gonna give us a reminder where we're at with the project timeline.
All right. Yeah, again, thanks everybody for being here this evening. It's great to see you all. I know you probably would rather be out Christmas shopping or doing something fun, but we do appreciate the time you take to be with us, to walk through this Pell process with us and share your thoughts on this whole overall project. I know this process has taken longer than we anticipated. The Pell process for us at Washington State Ferries and WashDOT is somewhat a new process. So we're all learning it like you are. So again, appreciate you being here, showing up, representing your communities, and bringing issues to us that are important. And we'll make sure that we get that into the project record here. As Laura said, Hadley was not able to join, but I know I can speak for her that she really appreciates the last few years working with all of you, and we're glad you're all part of this. So this is just you've seen this slide 100 times now. This is just a reminder of our overall timeline. We're wrapping up what we're calling the level 3 screening, and our next step is really to make a recommendation for an alternative that we move then into the NEPA SEPA phase and memorialize it with the Pell report. Let's go to the next slide. So again, we've been through a couple levels here now in screening. We started out with 15 different alternatives for the Fauntleroy terminal. We narrowed that down in level 2, and of course in level 2 we narrowed it down to essentially the 2 alternatives that we have, but we've created some subsets of that. And this is an important milestone for us because we're now at the point where we're ready to take what we've heard from you over the last several years. We've narrowed it down. We've kind of looked at all of the criteria, and we're ready to kind of share with you what the results were and carry forward into the environmental process a single option. The CAG roadmap, we're getting towards the end, let's say. You can see the various steps that we've taken along the way. There was obviously a number of different topics that we've tackled through different products that our consultant teams helped us with, the traffic study, intersection analysis, the environmental analysis, and so on and so forth. And all of that culminates in where we're at today with the final sort of level 3 screening results, and an opportunity for you all to weigh in on what we've kind of concluded, identify any other things that you would like to bring forward on the alternatives that we're going to present in front of you. And then again, we'll take that into the final Pell report and into the NEPA and SEPA process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marcia Tolan, who's our environmental lead for Washington State Ferries.
Unmute.
Marcia, you're on mute.
Yep, sorry about that. Thank you, Dave, and thanks, Laura, for reminding me about mute. And I wish you all a good evening. So I want to tell you about the next slides that we'll show you, which is about our approach to level 3 screening. This builds upon the work that we've done through level 1 and level 2, as Dave has just described to you, to develop screening criteria and then to refine the range of alternatives. So this is a snapshot of all the alternatives we have evaluated during level 3 screening. It's a familiar slide to you, showing the A alternatives that are similar in size to the current dock and then slightly larger to meet current design and safety standards. And then there are the B alternatives that are longer than the current dock. And finally, alternative C, which is the largest option, accommodating the full ferry load on the dock. Let's move to the next slide. We applied the same criteria we used during level 1 and 2 screening and developed 29 performance factors or indicators of how well the alternatives meet the criteria. For a more detailed assessment of the level 3 alternatives, which are shown here, our team considered technical analyses and community and advisory group input to complete screening. And as a technical overview, this slide lists the work products that inform this process. We've shared the majority of this information in our prior meetings and are happy to send any of this information to you after today's meeting. As a reminder, here's the full set of screening criteria we were using to evaluate the alternatives. Everything from structural reliability, resilience, operational efficiency, and environmental considerations to factors like cost, schedule, and risk. The next couple of slides highlight the level 3 screening results. The dark green boxes represent the highest performance rating, with the lighter green indicating medium performance, and white shows low performance. So Haley is going to add a copy of the report in the chat for you. So if you want to follow along, you can do so. The screening results showed some factors perform the same across all alternatives. For example, we're building a structurally sound alternative, sound terminal that will accommodate rising sea level, regardless of which alternative advances. So that came through clearly in these summary slides. Regarding the key criteria, in reviewing the results, we focused in on the performance factors that differ between alternatives, and in particular, operational efficiency and environmental. These two categories are most critical to meeting our Pell purpose and need, while minimizing impacts to the surrounding environment and community as much as possible. We have heard from all 3 advisory groups and our tribal partners about the importance of minimizing impacts to the surrounding environment and building a terminal that operates more efficiently. So as you can see from the shading, alternatives B and B3 have the most dark and light green boxes. Next, we'll dig into these results and talk more about what this means. To help you understand the process and how we arrived at these results, we'll walk through some of the performance factors highlighted on the previous slide. Although we won't go through all of the performance factors in this meeting, the Level 3 screening report covers each of those factors in detail. And Trevor's going to kick us off with unloading and loading times.
Thank you, Marcia.
Sure.
My name's Trevor Sharp, and I represent operations for the WSF side. Many of you have known me from these meetings previously, so I will jump right on into this and kind of go through the ratings. So, as we shared in an earlier meeting, our traffic analysis modeled load and unload times for pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicles for each alternative, including those with good to go and wave to go. This is a key performance indicator of the ability to meet the scheduled dwell times and maintain or improve ferry schedule reliability and on-time performance. Our high performance rating modeled load and unload times of 15 minutes or less, reducing load time by 20% and meeting scheduled dwell times, significantly improving on-time performance. Our medium performance rating modeled load times between 15 and 19 minutes. These alternatives maintain or slightly reduce the load and unload time and meet the scheduled dwell times and maintain or improve on-time performance. And our low performance rating was modeled time that was 19 minutes or more. Alternatives with a low performance rating are unable to meet the scheduled dwell times or to improve on-time performance. And there's your results. Alternative A was low. Alternative A1, A2, and A3 were medium. And alternative Bs and the alternative C were all high. Our next performance rating was queuing. The next key factor looks at impacts to vehicles queuing on Fauntleroy Way. WSF estimated queuing of vehicles on Fauntleroy Way for weekday and weekend conditions. Our high performance rating was a lower percentage of sailings with queuing, shorter queue lengths overall, shorter peak queue lengths, and or faster reduction of queue length over time. Our medium performance rating, similar percentage of sailings with queuing and with shorter queue lengths, or a faster reduction in queue length over time. And our low performance rating was a higher percentage of sailings with queuing, greater queue lengths overall, greater peak queue lengths, and or slower reduction of queue lengths over time. And there was our rating. Alternative A was low, alternative A1, A2, and A3 were medium, and all the alternative Bs and alternative C were in the high. Our next one was vehicle staging. We designed all alternatives with wider lanes and improved lane configuration to better manage ferry loading and vehicle sorting for the dual destination sailings. Our high performance rating applied to all alternatives with at least 4 full-length lanes of greater length, but with no more than 4 full-length lanes where half-length lanes are used. Our medium performance rating applied to an alternatives with more than 4 full-length lanes of greater length and where half-length lanes are used. And WSF reviewed the largest dock configuration, which was alternative C, with 5 full-length lanes and 2 half-length lanes, and determined that although it provides some improvement in the ability for staging, it may be challenging to manage the vehicles. And then our low performance rating applied to alternatives that do not add full-length lanes. Now the ratings, all A alternatives and at B3 received low ratings. Alternative C received medium, and alternative B1, B, and B2 all received high ratings. Next up, vehicle sorting. All right. WSF designed all alternatives to provide 1 12-foot ADA, 2 10-foot truck lanes, 1 9-foot lane minimum to assist with accessibility, managing of loading, and sorting our vehicles. Our high performance rating applied to all alternatives that have provided more lanes and some longer lanes, providing the most space to sort and accommodate ADA, emergency vehicles, medical requests, and other preferential loading categories. Our medium performance rating applied to alternatives that provide the same number of lanes and some longer lanes. These alternatives offer some improvement in the space to sort vehicles, and our low performance rating applied to alternatives that do not add or build longer lanes These alternatives do not improve space to sort the vehicles. And there you go. All A's they're the low standard. Alternative B is a medium standard, and alternative B1, B2, B3, and alternative C are all high standards. Then the next factor, we looked at the distance for people walking, biking, and rolling onto the ferry. Our high performance rating applied to alternatives with a distance to walk, bike, or roll from the Fauntleroy Way to the end of the vehicle transfer span of no more than the current dock, which is 850 feet. Our medium performance rating applied to alternatives with a distance between 850 feet and 1,050 feet, less than 200 feet further than the current dock. I will note that we did consult our ADA specialist and noted that a walkway distance within 200 feet is similar from an accessibility standpoint if there are enough places to rest and an appropriate grade. We will consider incorporating those places during the next project phase. And then our low performance rating applied to alternatives 1,050 feet or more than 200 feet further than the current dock. And the results, alternative A was high, alternative A1, A2, and A3 were medium, and alternative B's and alternative C were the low. And I believe next up is any questions for operations.
Trevor, yeah, we just did want to pause there. That's a lot of information, and I'm sure there are some questions and comments for Trevor. Trevor, the first one is just a simple one in the chat here, asking if the results are based on the 3-boat schedule at all times.
Yes.
It's one of our assumptions looking out to the future. Okay, thank you. Gary, I am just going in the order that I see the hands raised.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that confused me was under option C, the comment was made that it was maybe difficult to manage the operations, apparently because of the additional lane. That confuses me. It would seem like it might be simpler, but I'm curious why it would be more challenging.
So the reason it's more challenging is if it was like a one destination place, it'd be a lot easier to manage because we could just keep rolling the lot over. When you get 2 destinations and, you look at like we are now, you have 80-car lot, you add another 100 cars onto it. If we had load 124 cars on, we'd still have 60 cars left behind. For our staff, it's hard to figure out with a dual destination which vehicles are going to go first and which one aren't. Does that make sense, Gary?
I understand where the rationale comes from, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, we have people that have been moving cars on the docks for decades, essentially, and you're saying because we have a bigger dock, it's more difficult to do what we have been doing for a long time. That doesn't make sense.
Well, we're looking for efficiency is what we're looking for.
And I guess my retort to that is, so if I have an additional lane, which the C dock does, then I would think I'd have more options for efficiency. I could load whatever group I want to put in there. I just don't see that comment fits the C. But I'm going to leave it with you guys because you're the ones that have to make it work, not me. I just have to ride.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gary.
Gary, it's a great question, and I think one that a lot of folks are probably wondering about. So thanks for putting that out there. Marty.
Yeah, so very similar to Gary's question, which is that I don't understand the difference between the staging and the sorting between the B and the B3 options that you are preferring. So I just needed some more understanding about that.
So the best I can explain it like this is what we look at is queuing from the toll booth up the road. Sorting is right behind the toll booth, and the actual staging is in the actual lot parked. I hope that gives you a better understanding of what we're talking about when we go staging of the cars that are in the lot. The sorting part is being able to separate them right behind the toll booth of which lanes they're going to and which lanes they're using. And then the queuing part is back behind the toll booths.
Yeah, so I still struggle because they seem so similar, those two options. There's a slight difference in the right after the toll booths, but I still wonder why one would be white and the other one wouldn't be. So
I'm not sure. Charlie, can you, or Laura, can you bring up B1? Because if I'm not mistaken, B3 does have half lanes. Or
Yeah, I think
am I thinking of the 155s, B1 and B2? But
yeah, I think
I was thinking B had the longer lanes. B had the same length with two extra short lanes, or B3, B2, B3 did.
traffic there. And then I see Mark Bandy is maybe off
Yeah.
mute. Mark, are you able
Okay.
to come in?
There you go, Mark.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, let me try and add on to both Gary and Marty your comments. Part of the dialogue here was it was really this kind of sort of combination of having an odd full length lane and then the half lanes. That was what, when we talked with Trevor and his other operations colleagues, that, as Trevor alluded to, just managing the sorting and staging when you're out on the terminal, on the dock itself, with the odd number of lanes and which one's full, and then a couple half length lanes. That's where, like, a larger number of lanes, even in terms of number of vehicles it can hold, becomes a bit more complex and therefore less efficient from how the operation staff felt about it once you're looking at that type of configuration.
yeah, I see that they have the alternatives up on the screen there, and you can see that the confusion because B and B3 it's not really half lane. I mean the lanes are almost identical except for the very close to toll booth zone 1 area. We have a lot to cover, so I won't keep going.
Marty, it sounds like there's maybe an opportunity there though for us to communicate that more clearly. Frank, you've been patiently waiting.
Thank you. Can we go back to the slide that shows the dwell time or the loading times? And I guess
Yes.
this is the first time I'm seeing that slide. I apologize if it's been on something I haven't seen. It is shown this way. That's the queuing, yeah, loading time. So the under 15 minutes, I mean, there's so many variables that go into the loading time. I guess you're saying that it's going to save 4 minutes by having a larger dock than the A options. Is that my understanding?
I suppose it's easier if I'm off mute. Yes, you are correct, Frank.
And then, but yet the medium performance, it shows that it reduces dwell load unload time by up to 20%. And it's anticipated to have some improvement on time performance as compared to the no build option, whereas the other options, the longer docks, they say they significantly improve on time performance.
Correct.
And these are modeled times, correct? Nobody, these stopwatch times, and are these taken various times of various days, or is this just modeled?
Modeled.
To where, okay, so we have no idea how these actually are going to play out.
Mark, do you want to say a little bit more about
I'll
the
just add on,
assumptions?
Frank. You recall when we watched through these results specifically in a couple meetings ago. Yeah, this is using a traffic simulation model that is basically it's representing the operation of the current dock. You baseline against that, and then you using all the sort of the inputs into it about the observations of how long it takes to unload vehicles, walk time, walk bike, as well as the load, and then it's comparing that baseline, which is essentially the existing dock size, to the different alternative dock sizes. So it is modeled, and so the way to think about it is it is a relative time savings in this operation across this. But and so in a sense, it is, of course, not going to capture and factor in if there's an unusual thing that happens on the dock, a longer truck,
Sure.
unload, but relative to each other, we can use it to kind of help sort and break that into how each of the dock sizes would perform specific to this criteria.
Okay, I think this is a lot to unpack here and a lot of other conversation to have, but I'll let other people talk. Thank you.
Great. Gary, did you have another question?
Just a comment. I think that the explanation that determines where the staging and sorting and all that happened would be helpful to be put on the slide, because I didn't understand that until that comment was made verbally. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great feedback. Marty, is your hand up for earlier, or did you have something else?
Well, yes, this is actually from Marcia, where she introduces things and says that we have been alerted to the cost estimates, and cost estimates have been presented to us throughout. And I have not seen any, and I think that there's probably not too many differences in the cost estimates between B and B3 that you're putting forward, but I just think that's erroneous. And cost has never been something that the Washington State Fairs has decided was an important factor. And the kitchen example, where they say, well, you know, when you develop a kitchen, this came up a couple of meetings ago. You know, we laughed afterwards because you always think cost first, and it's just been an incredibly elusive point to get anybody to comment on.
Yeah, I think to clarify, if you want to go back to that slide, Haley, what Marcia was just explaining is that these are the work products that our team and the analysis that the team has used to think about screening. Many of them are ones we talked about in detail. I know when we get a little bit further and looking at the results, you know, maybe Dave can say a little bit more about how we're thinking about costs in the context of screening. But you're right that is not one where we've sent out a detailed report like the others.
And I also have one basic question, which is these are drafts that you have sent to us, and I understood from long ago that you're taking one alternative forward to the NEPA SEPA. And so although we had no input in the decision to get to B or B3, are both of those going forward, or is only one of those going forward?
Yeah, I think with that comment, Marty, if we'll just have you hold until the end, Marcia is going to talk a little bit more about environmental, and then we can talk about kind of the process and how we have used the feedback that we've heard from all three communities to get to this.
The only reason I bring it up at this point is you know, are we here today to you know, comment on B1 and B and B3, or are we here to comment on everything? Because or is everything else already gone?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We really are seeking your input on the information that we've collected up into this point, the analysis. Do you have questions about the process itself, about how, you know, we're taking this information and evaluating the alternatives, and certainly open to feedback on the alternatives themselves. And this is not the last point before we wrap up the Pell study, so we'll also talk about other upcoming opportunities for input. And
I'll just add another comment to your answer there, Laura. You have seen a lot of this work products, and you've commented on those, and those are no longer drafts. We've finalized those documents. What we were hoping to get out of this evening is you to look at how we then applied those factors, the 14 minutes, the 19 minutes, the so many square feet here, the so many, look at how we sort of divided up these areas and assigned low, medium, and high performance ratings to those, and give us some feedback on how we did the math. Gary's comment earlier was a very good one. Like, okay, why intuitively it doesn't seem to make sense that the C is actually harder to stage than the B's and the A's. So help us understand that. And that's why we want we want you to give us some feedback on that. We're gonna take that. We're gonna try to make this product better. There are certainly things that you guys have a different perspective on that we're welcome to listen to. So that's kind of, I just wanted to add to what Laura said.
Yeah, that's very important. Thanks, Dave. Okay, with that, we're gonna dig into the
Well, I actually
environmental
have-
category.
I actually have one more comment on that. And that is that for the 14 and 19 and et cetera, the FCA has done reviews of that and used your numbers and has requested a meeting because they came to different conclusions. And is that meeting in progress, or is that what do you know about that?
I'll defer to John Zena. Hadley's not here to answer that. I'm not aware of a conversation on that. I will reiterate what Mark Bandy said. Again, this is a model, and going out there with a stopwatch on a Tuesday and trying to capture exactly what the model is doing is always going to give you a number that's slightly different.
Oh, no, you're misunderstanding.
Yeah.
You're using the exact numbers that you used in your previous presentations, which were elaborate and showed various way to go or good to go or different, other models. And so, yeah, so Hadley may be aware and you may not be aware, but
Yeah.
there's some contention with regard to your conclusions that no docs other than the A docs benefit.
Yeah, David, thanks for kicking it to me. So,
Yeah.
I apologize that Hadley is unexpectedly out. I think one of the most important parts of this process is that we don't silo different communities. This has been a group effort. So my request would be, I don't know about this request and Hadley's out, perhaps for an extended time. So if you would like to email us your questions or your observations, and we can share our answers with everyone.
It's not me. I'll have them directed to
Marty,
John.
do not interrupt. You have already called out one of my colleagues, I think inappropriately for her work. This needs to be respectful on both sides. So we let you talk, now I'm talking, and then you can respond. So I think what would be helpful is if we had the FCA's comments, questions, data that we can look at and respond appropriately, that we can share with everyone and not silo this with one community picking things off. I'm finished.
I appreciate that, John. And there's no intention to silo. And I was just wondering if you had any knowledge of it. And apparently that needs to be followed up at a later time.
Yep, I'm happy to do that with you or Frank or whoever. Do that. And I would, I know that there are strong feelings around this project. I know that the people from WSDOT on this call, Marcia specifically, take their work really seriously and community input seriously. So to the extent people are frustrated, if you can direct it about the data and not calling people out by name, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
With that, we will move on to our environmental category. Marcia?
Sure. Well, just as Trevor walked you through the operational performance ratings and criteria, I'm going to do so similarly with the environmental. So we heard throughout this process that the community values minimizing impacts to Cove Park. So the next factor looks at how permanent encroachment on Cove Park might be. We looked at the dock widening to the north in the upper shoreline riparian zone, which is known as Zone 1, as an indicator of permanent encroachment on Cove Park. The high performance rating we identified as 0 and 7.3 feet above additional width in Zone 1. The medium performance rating is identified as 7.3 feet and 14.6 feet of additional width in Zone 1. The low performance rating is identified as 14.6 feet and 22 feet of additional width in Zone 1. And the results came out to be that alternative B1 received a low performance rating. The A alternatives and B received a medium performance rating, and B2 and B3 received a high performance rating. So let's move now to cultural resources. This factor looks at how cultural resources impacts, what those impacts are for each alternative. Additional structure in Zone 1, upper shoreline and riparian area, is an indicator of ground disturbance that could impact cultural resources. For the high performance rating, it applied to the alternatives with the least additional footprint in Zone 1, between 0 and 2,353 square feet. The medium performance rating applied to alternatives had a medium area of additional footprint in Zone 1, between 2,353 square feet to 4,707 square feet, and the low performance rating applied to alternatives with the greatest area of additional footprint in Zone 1, between 4,707 square feet and 7,060 square feet. So the results of this came out to be that the A alternatives, B2 and B3, received medium performance ratings, while alternative A, B, and B1 and C received low performance ratings. For overwater coverage, looking at how each alternative increases that overwater coverage, those that performed high had the least additional overwater coverage, up to 16,667 square feet. The median performance was with an additional overwater coverage between 16,667 and 33,333 square feet, with a low performance rating between 33,333 square feet and 50,000 square feet. So the results showed that the rest of the A alternatives received medium performance ratings, and B and C alternatives had low performance ratings in this category. Let's move to mitigation cost. So for indicators of environmental mitigation costs include the increase in overwater coverage in Zone 2. And Zone 2, if you remember, it provides the nearshore habitat for eelgrass and macroalgae, and the increase in total overwater coverage. So moving the dock and berthing structures further offshore into deeper water improves WSF's opportunity to restore eelgrass and macroalgae. This helps reduce or eliminate ferry propeller wash from eroding the scour hole, and may allow for eelgrass and macroalgae to grow in Zone 2. With the high performance rating, there is no increase of overwater coverage in Zone 2, and no increase of total overwater coverage. We expect these would have the least environmental mitigation cost. And so for medium performance rating, the smallest increase of overwater coverage in Zone 2, or the smallest increase of total overwater coverage, and those that perform low had the greatest increase of total overwater coverage, and a medium to high increase of overwater coverage in Zone 2. We expected that these would have the greatest environmental mitigation cost. So the results came out to be that alternative B and B3 received high performance ratings. A alternatives received medium performance ratings, and alternative B1, B2, and C received low performance ratings. So the next category is eelgrass restoration. So this looks at the impact or provides opportunities to restore macroalgae and eelgrass. So by moving berthing structures further offshore into deeper waters, it reduces or eliminates ferry propeller wash disturbance within Zone 2, and potentially allows for restoring eelgrass and macroalgae. High performance rating is when we move the dock and berthing structures further offshore, and have the smallest increase in overwater coverage in Zone 2. A medium performance rating is when we move the dock and berthing structures further offshore and have medium increase in overwater coverage in Zone 2. And alternatives that perform low do not move the dock and berthing structures further offshore, or that have the highest increase in overwater coverage in Zone 2. And the results from this screening came out to be that it was all centered around looking at the potential for eelgrass restoration. So alternative B is the only alternative to receive a high performance rating. The rest of the B alternatives had medium performance ratings, while the A and C alternatives had a low performance rating. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you to explain this screening results.
Yeah, so thank you, Marcia. And again, we got lots of time here to dive into this and talk about some specifics, but you've heard a nice overview here on the two principal categories that really drove a lot of the scoring, and that is the operational efficiency and the permitting and coordination. So again, I think somebody made a comment in the chat about the Academy Awards and the drama associated with this. Pulling back the curtain for those of you that have not already took a look at the report, what we are recommending advance and move forward is a footprint that's based on alternatives B and B3, which accommodate somewhere between 124 and 155 vehicles on the dock. And I caveat that with those two alternatives in our calculus scored the best, with B2 a very close second. The alternatives A and C scored lower, and so that's kind of where we landed. And I'll kind of highlight a couple of specifics here. So with the alternative A's, while they had they minimized, of course, the overwater coverage. They also minimized the benefit to operational efficiency. And so while they do have an environmental advantage, they also do not allow us to repair the scour hole that's been caused over time and mitigate some of the eelgrass that's been lost there. Alternative C, the largest dock option, has the largest amount of overwater coverage, the largest environmental impact, and will be the most complex to permit and to mitigate. And as we talked at the beginning of the hour, as Gary brought up, there is some operational inefficiency with that, believe it or not. And that's something that factored into a slightly lower score. Alternatives B1 and B2, those are the longer dock options. They do improve operational efficiency over B and B3, but they scored slightly lower in the environmental performance ratings, as Marcia said, and they do, B1 and B2 are the 155 car docks, and they do require a little bit bigger overwater area. So in conclusion, what rose to the top was alternatives B and B3, which are the longer dock options. They improve the operational efficiency, sorting, staging, and queuing. They provide a nice environmental impact, not too much, not too little. They also move particularly the dock into deeper water, so it gives us that potential to mitigate the scour hole that's been created, an opportunity to restore some eelgrass around the dock that doesn't exist out there today. And so that is kind of where we, Washington State Ferries, when we went through all the screening criteria, that's where we landed. And that looks to us to be the, again, I've called it the Goldilocks solution. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's not too soft, it's not too hard. It's that spot right in the middle. And what we'd like to do is move the bees into the next phase of the environmental review. But we want to get into some questions and answers too here and get some feedback on that conclusion. So I'll give it back to Laura.
Dave? Yeah, with that, we'll take more questions and comments. Victoria, I see you have a question there in the chat about the rise in sea level and whether that affects the scouring effects from the ferry. So in other words, if the dock were the same length, but the sea level were higher, like 10 feet higher. Would that protect the eelgrass beds? Marcia, I see you are off mute. You have a
Sure.
response?
Yeah, logically that makes sense, but in reality, sea level rise happens gradually over time, and to build a dock at the same length, we would not have that 10 feet of coverage that is anticipated when sea level rise actually gets to that point. So we would still be seeing scour. It would be right in that really productive zone, which is zone 2, where we want to protect eelgrass and macroalgae growth. We would still have a lot of activity within that zone. You know, if the level of the sea were different than it is today, then perhaps there would be less scour occurring by the vessels. But that's not the case now, and it wouldn't be 10 feet higher at the time that we go into construction.
Marcia.
Sure.
Okay, I see several hands up here. Victoria.
Just a follow-up question. Do the ferry that are once you go electric, do they have a different scour pattern than our current ferries? I'm just curious about that.
Well,
Question, Dave?
so the design of those boats has not started yet. That's a great question. I think from a naval architecture standpoint, the propellers are going to be about the same size. They're moving about the same size vessel, might be a little bit heavier, but that wouldn't change the scour hole appreciably. It's if we were bringing in a boat that was a half the size or just a small skiff, yeah, certainly that would impact the scour hole. But these boats are all going to be about the same size. They're going to have the same type of propulsion systems. So that won't have an effect when we electrify the facility.
Fletcher, haven't heard from you yet.
Mine, we didn't really talk about this one here, but it's in the document. It's just about reducing or not increasing traffic on Fauntleroy Way. And my question about it is I guess there's two ways to think about traffic. There's like just how many vehicles move through, and then there's kind of the speed with which the vehicles move through. And it seems like the bigger docks, they absorb the cars so that they aren't idling on Fauntleroy Way. So it's just, so from one way of thinking, it's like a lot less traffic because the cars aren't on the road for nearly as long at sometimes. Anyway, but that's just, I guess, how Seattle defines traffic, but one way or the other. So
Yeah, thanks for that, Fletcher. And I see Mark is off camera here. Maybe Mark can tell us a little bit more about how we looked at traffic.
Yeah, let me just quickly note on that, Fletcher, with respect to the item you brought up, we felt like that was the criteria around queuing, and so we didn't want to queuing was about the topic you just said. This was circulation, thinking more about did a dock change did any alternative change the patterns in which people came to the terminal itself? And basically, since the terminal is at this location, none of the alternatives are doing that. So that's what this topic was about: circulation, approaching, direction, that kind of thing. So since we'd already captured queuing in that separate category, we didn't want to repeat that here.
Angus.
Let me start with just a quick question. A reminder, please. The focus on eelgrass is around is that around like salmon in the very young stage and then Dungeness crab? Are there other species that are being protected here?
Oh, well, Angus, I'm not a biologist, but it is the health of the eelgrass is a indicator of the health of the nearshore environment. So there are a lot of species that live within it, as well as forage fish. It's an appropriate zone for those that sea life as well. So it's not just salmon and Dungeness crab, but there's sandlands or species that need that seagrass to be available.
And then have you thought about, or do you think about the like underwater artificial reef aspect to the dock? Like that would be like anti-correlated with coverage, right? We've got endangered rockfish in Puget Sound. We've got, ling cod, which are fairly protected species in Puget Sound. Is that ever considered?
Well, if you think back about where we are at this stage, it's been a lengthy process, but we are still at a planning level stage. So the factors that we used were ones that could tell us an indication of that had some strong indication of where great impacts would be for each alternative. And so when we move forward into NEPA and SEPA, we do a little bit more iteration of we begin to freeze, we begin to refine it. And then there's an iterative approach with analysis of the environment based on that refinement of design. And when we undertake that and present that to resource agencies, when we're looking at how do we permit this project, then there's a lot more discussion about all of the other sea life that's there, their needs, and how this project may threaten or not threaten their livelihood.
And then just one more comment that I don't need a response to. I mean, this is the data scientist in me. The two features that are the length of the dock and then the overwater coverage of the dock, those are correlated, right? If I was doing this analysis, you could reduce those to a single feature based on kind of the availability of restored area for the eelgrass, and not treat those independently. Like that would be a better model in the data science world, to consider the correlated aspect of those functions rather than treat them as if they were orthogonal.
You mean the length of the dock and the
area
of increase
correlated to the area of the dock? Yeah.
Yeah, they're both correlated together.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Yes. Hey, Gary, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm scratching my dim memory here because my recollection was, it seemed like a decade ago, the long-range plan looked at a future as of 2040. And if that's correct, I'm a little concerned because we're planning on finishing this in about 2031 or so. So is it good for 9 years, or is the long-range plan actually a longer period? Thank you.
Yeah, Gary, I hope we're not confusing it too much. So the design life for our new facilities, like a brand new trestle here at Fauntleroy, would have a 75-year design life. The long range plan, we update those. I'm John, feel free to jump in here. We update those every 20 years, at least, maybe more frequently. And those are just a projection out about 20 years. So not too far in the future, we're going to have a 2050 long range plan. And then 10 years later, there'll be a 2060 long range plan. And that's just to look at least in the medium term, what our needs are as a community, looking at our ridership, looking at how trends change in the way people use transit. Please don't confuse that with the structural engineers' intentions of designing this thing to last until the end of the century, which is the design standard that we use at WSF and is used internationally. So yeah, I hope that helps explain that a little bit.
It helps explain it. I'm just remembering, and I'm going way back now, when there used to be a Puget Sound Council of Governors PISCOG, I think it was called. And they were actually doing population projections 30 or 40 years in advance, and they were remarkably accurate. And so my concern is if we're looking at a 75-year period or a longer period, if Kitsap County explodes with population, which I don't think it'll happen, but I'm not going to be around to see it. I'm just a little cautious that we're looking at building something. And even if you are going to mod it, and the concern I think is if you come back in 10 years now and you say, you know what, we really need to look at this again. And gee whiz, there's going to be a lot more vehicles coming across to this terminal than we expected. Too late. We built it. So I guess that's my concern. And I don't think you can't solve this. So
no, that's a good point.
problem.
But there is, Gary, there is one element here that's different than building a highway, and that is that we have a fixed size vessel to transport those vehicles. And so that is not, the plan is not to change that from the 124 car vessel that's out there right now to suddenly put a 500 car vessel on the route or whatever. So that fixes that growth. So there will be growth. The other point that is important for all of us to be thinking about is how can we get people out of their cars and walking on or riding their bike or whatever, and not using cars. So that I think is going to be where there's opportunity for growth in the system. It's the walk-ons and the connections to the bus and the future light rail in West Seattle. But that vessel capacity really fixes that, and I think that this can work certainly in the long term.
I think you're right. And my only suggestion is if you're going to make that statement here, which I think is a valid statement, I think you need to make the same statement in these documents. So people, when they read through, say, well, our vessel sizes are not changing, therefore our capacity is not going to be that much different. So it makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's good feedback. Thank you. We'll go to Frank next, and then Justin and Judy.
Thank you. So David, you brought up before that there's, I guess earlier was talked about this, no decisions have been made yet. You guys are going to put two options forward through Pell. Yet I hear Marcia talk about, the environmental stuff, and you've talked about cost. There's an awful lot of variables in this project, I think, at large, just regardless of which dock. I think cost is going to be the thing that's going to raise its head that nobody's even thinking about yet, or at least we're not talking about. You're planning on putting, I understand, two options forward, but then you said there's no options that have been determined yet. We're supposed to provide input on weight of the, if you would, weight of the criteria. Kind of mixed message there, but my question is as if you put forward the two options you've mentioned, and in the Pell study, or as this project develops, there's roadblocks that are possibly insurmountable. Do you have a plan for swerving or shifting or looking at something else, or how would that move forward? This may be way too far out in the future, and if the case is, that's fine, but just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Frank. Nothing about this is easy. As you can look at this graphic in front of you, there's always, like everything else in life, there's always trade-offs. And certainly with picking the size that best works for operations and cost and, project schedule and permitting, there's always going to be trade-offs. What we've asked this group to do all through the process here is just provide us input on how we're looking at the analysis that Mark talked about, how we're looking at the layout of this dock, and I don't want to say it's multiple options, Frank. We're looking at a footprint here, and the B3 footprint is a minimum of 124 cars. It's a minimum of one boat's worth of holding. There is, through the environmental process and into the design, the opportunity to try to find even a sweeter spot that takes those features in B3 and B and even B2, which scored quite well, and come up with the best fit to account for maximum, like like Angus said, to maximize the minimization of on the seabed and the potential for eelgrass restoration, to maximize the or minimize our costs, minimize the amount of right of way that we have to work with. There are right of way extents that go out into the water that we have to stay out of those zones, minimizing the amount of impact on the beach. All of those things as we get into design we're going to continue to try to refine it so that we can minimize as much as possible. And of course, paying attention to costs and come up with the right fit. Right now, what we've concluded in this process is that the 124 size dock is really the sort of the sweet spot in this analysis, but that might not be the final number depending on all these other little factors, but it's going to be 124 or a hybrid of 124. Does that help?
Yeah, as obviously it's very challenging to figure that out. My question was just is as the process moves forward, are you committed to these two options, or but you've answered that question, it's gonna be a hybrid or some kind. So yeah, it helps. I mean, and then I had one other comment. Marcia, I in your microalgae and eelgrass, if you can go to that page, please, you make a comment that or maybe it's anyway, there was a comment about moving the dock out of moving the boats out of the prop wash zone. And in the first slide you brought up, the A docks are 200 feet longer. So to say that I'm just challenging the comment that the A options don't have any impact on eelgrass, because if your comment is right, moving the docks out of the prop wash zone is what is desired, that they do that. So I guess I just challenged that number a little bit, but that's what I have. Thank you.
I believe that.
Yeah, we're on the wrong slide. Laura, if we can get to the eelgrass one, or you could go back to the overview of all 9 options in that oblique, and you can see where the longer dock pulls itself away from the scour hole, which is that lighter colored blue.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best visual.
Yeah, and if you look at alternative A, you look at the dolphin or the eelgrass end of the horseshoe shape area, if you would, is between the end of the dock and the end of the towers or the towers. And if you look at A1, A2, A3, the end of the dock is even with the end of the eelgrass. So, I mean, to me, that's substantial. That's an improvement. Not saying substantial, but to have there be no accounting of the eelgrass, that area will be mitigated in all the A dock options to some point, since I don't believe there's any program to improve to replant eelgrass. Seems like it's all to allow it to regrow or to enhance or to help it. I don't know. I guess this is another question. Is there a program, or is there something going to be done to reinstitute eelgrass, or is it just going to hope it comes back in this area?
Yeah, I think looking at the level 3 screening report and then also looking at the environmental analysis memo will be helpful in understanding the difference between A and the B alternatives. It does show a little bit by this image here that A1 through A3 extend a bit farther out, but the length of the dock getting even further past that zone that we identified as zone 2, which is not on these drawings, is that crucial area for eelgrass and macroalgae restoration. So as we move farther along in the design development, and then also in looking at how the impacts change or not change with that design, we'll be also considering mitigation factors. So there's a great bonus and mitigation factor already in moving the dock past that zone 2, so that natural restoration can occur. But as we work with our resource agencies on the permitting process is when we identify even more what other ways that mitigation can occur to help the eelgrass in this location, which could very well be planting more and seeing how that works. Or, it travels around and you'll have more concentration of it on one side of the dock on 1 year, and then a patch of more of it on another side of the dock in another year. It travels, so the planting works to a degree, but it's not foolproof. So we would introduce different ways to mitigate, and by mitigation I mean offset those impacts and improve what's out there to the degree we can.
Okay.
Is
All
that
right.
helpful?
Thank you. Yes,
Marsha?
that's
Yeah.
taking too much time. Thank you.
Thanks. I also just want to clarify there, Frank, that alternatives are just about 50 feet longer than the current dock, which Ed Thomas, our engineering lead, verified for me. So
there was a comment Martian made at the very beginning that the dock and the A options increased the length of the dock by 200 feet. Did I mishear that?
I think that was the longer dock alternatives, but we can maybe verify that and get back to you. I know other folks have their hands raised.
We could go to the graphic if you want, but I think you might have misheard that, Frank.
Okay, my apology then. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Justin, I hope you haven't lost sight of your feedback.
Thanks. First, just a question before I get to the rest of my comments. Does the state have, or does anybody know of any plans, or even potential plans to build any more Issaquah class vessels?
David, you want me to say?
Yeah, John, why don't you take that one?
So, just a little bit of background. The long-range plan calls for us to have 26 vessels. We currently have 21. We have been funded by the legislature to build 5 hybrid electric boats, which will be somewhat like the Olympics. They're going to be, instead of 144, they're going to be 160 vehicle. The next phase of the long-range plan calls for us to have 11 more boats, so building 16. And part of that is the replacement of the Issaquah class. This year, the legislature funded us, earlier this year, they funded us to look at what's the best way to do that. So should we take those 160s and adapt them somehow, those 160 vehicles that we're building, should we adapt them? Should we design a whole new boat? Talking to the crews and the people on the route, 124 is about the right size vessel for this route. And so we are exploring those options right now. And, if people are interested, we can go down a rabbit hole of the budget and how tough things are right now, and that everything's a little bit in limbo given the state transportation budget. But we will, deliver the legislature our best thinking on how to move forward and then go from there. But replacing the Issaquah class is the next legislative priority and long-range plan priority for our vessel replacement plan.
Thanks, John. I promise I won't take us down a rabbit hole. But just to be clear, when we say replacing the Issaquah class, we mean replacing those specific vessels, not necessarily building new Issaquah class vessels. Okay, so all of that is to say, and you probably see where I'm going here, that I would actually argue that vessel sizes are actually changing. The Olympics are, just a little bit larger than the Issaquah class, right? The 140 versus 144 versus 124. I think I got that right. And then it looks like the new hybrid electrics are going to be a little bit bigger still. At 160, I have a gut feeling that probably those Olympics are going to trickle down to us. That seems to be how it goes. And certainly if they have some service life left in them, let's use them, right? So all of that is to say that this is our one opportunity certainly for the rest of my working life, if not the rest of my actual lifetime, to build a dock that's going to meet the capacity that we really need on the island. And just as we had, like, I think the Steel Electrics, the La Jolla, that carried like 80 something cars, right? And then, we had a dock that held about 80 cars, and we had that sort of match. If we don't build a dock that has the capacity of the vessels that we're probably going to be using in the future, 10, 15 years from now, when these new vessels start coming online and start trickling down to the triangle route, we're literally going to have exactly the same problem. We're going to have a bigger vessel and a smaller dock. If we're okay with empty deck space, then I guess that's where it's going to live, but it's going to feel pretty frustrating. So all that is to say, I appreciate, the Goldilocks perspective, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but not too big, not too small. Definitely there's economies and excuse me, economies and diseconomies of scale and everything. I really want to strongly urge WSF to keep alternative B2 in the consideration. Obviously at 155 cars, it seems to be the one that's surviving, that has the ability to meet what I think realistically our needs will be. My last question is just a procedural, that I guess all this time I understood that we were going to advance one of the alternatives and not two or a group of the alternatives. So with that, I'll turn my mic off and wait for whatever response.
Justin, if I can just respond to one part, and then I don't know if David wants to respond to the other part, but part of this route is getting the right size dock and the right size vessels. So, I am concerned as the director of planning, customer service, all the things in my department, if we end up with a 160 car vessel, you and your neighbors, but to keep a sailing schedule with 3 boats, we're not always filling it. You and your neighbors will be on my cell phone talking about the boat leaving not full, and the balance between keeping the schedule and filling the boat, the age-old question for this route. Marty and I can talk about war stories of those conversations we had in 2018, 2019 about that. So we're going to do our best to right size, to have boats that are the right size for this route. As I said at the beginning, I think everyone agrees that's around a 124. But we'll see what we end up with at the end of this study, which I'm happy to share with you.
On that, if I could, I would throw out a pitch for the idea, and I know this is going to get studied and it's a whole nother process, but standardization of boats within the system will probably yield a lot of benefits. Being able to move boats around from run to run without disrupting service elsewhere is probably going to be worth it, which is why I tend to think, I guess I'm future forecasting a process that hasn't even started yet. Obviously risky, but I tend to think that we're probably going to end up with larger boats because of the system's justifiable need to standardize. So
definitely part of the next. Laura,
Yeah.
you'll let me in again, so I'll stop talking. But
Well, I'll just add a couple things. I know we got other questions we have to get to. Everything John said is spot on, Justin. We cannot forget that on Vashon and at Southworth, we have the same issue with a constrained amount of space. It's not quite as constrained as Fauntleroy, but we cannot build large, supersized boats and then create the same problem on Vashon as people are with the dock there that's very small. So we're being very aware of what your issue is, and we're having a lot of discussions internally about what the proper boat size should be. Back to your environmental process question. So I'm learning a lot about this from Marcia as we kind of move into the next phase. We are moving into the next phase not with options, but with a footprint. We are going to add refinement to this. I mentioned this before. There's going to be some design refinement around that, but we are moving forward with a footprint size. And not that anybody's taking it down to the decimal point on the square footage, but that it's going to be in that approximate Goldilocks size of 124-ish. That's what we're going to take in. And so there is opportunity in the environmental impacts phase of this to assess and refine that. So I don't want people to take away from this conversation that it's exactly this square footage or it's exactly 124.0 cars. We have an opportunity to take an approximate footprint into that phase, and we'll allow that phase to sort of flush out and make refinements in that at that point. The environmental phase allows us to do that, and it doesn't hinder our ability to make tweaks depending on sidewalk widths and bike staging and the need for sorting. So just want to kind of add to that. I don't know if Marcia, you have any other comments on the environmental process for Justin, but
No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
You go in with a footprint size, and our engineers are working on that design and refining it. But at the same time, we're learning in more detail about the environment and looking at if there's an increase in the footprint in this direction, what does that bias? How does that impact a resource in the environment? And it gets things get shaped up more.
So
as we move along, it's that process.
Okay. Thank you for that. Judy.
Okay. I look at this table of information from an environmental standpoint. That's my particular interest.
Okay.
And as I looked at it this morning, I came to a couple of what I think are understandings of what that you folks at the FAIR system appear to be willing to go to the mat for environmentally. And one of those is more overwater coverage. And I'm sure you have all known from the beginning that that's a pretty steep climb with the tribes and with those of us concerned about the creek. You must have some vague idea, or however vague idea, about how you're going to win that one. What do you think that would offset the negatives of more overwater coverage?
I'll let Marcia respond to that, but I just wanted to point out, Judy, that throughout this process, we continue to meet with the technical advisory group, including our resource agencies and tribal representatives, in addition to that government to government consultation that will be happening throughout the life project. So there have been some conversations and getting their feedback along the way, and Marcia can certainly tell us much more about overwater coverage and how we're balancing the environmental, minimizing environmental impacts as much as we can.
Right, and I'm aware of that, Laura. I just know that usually the word mitigation means offsetting elsewhere. And in the case of overwater coverage, I don't see an option elsewhere that would offset the impact on salmon habitat for more overwater coverage. So I'm really curious, if you're going to go to the mat for that one, you must have some ideas.
Well, it's great that we've been having a tag with all of the resource agencies who are going to be charged with providing us permits and approvals for this process, for this project. So they also are seeing that these alternatives require more overwater coverage than there currently exists, and will have other ideas out there that they will bring forward with us than we have on our own about what mitigation can occur. Certainly the tribes also have their own ideas about what would be an offsetting process or impact for the impacts that we're making here. So we don't have a secret pocket where we've got all of these ideas that we haven't put forward and shared with you, that are not in the environmental analysis document that talks about some of the ideas for mitigation. And certainly, just as I mentioned, the technical advisory team, a lot of those resource agencies will also have ideas that they've not shared with us yet. But when we get further into that process of seeking permits for the alternatives or for the project that we're going to be building, there will be some that they see are beneficial to that environment that's in the locale of Fauntleroy and perhaps in another locale.
Well, thank you. I don't see a high probability for anything that would do the job elsewhere, but yes, thank you, Marcia.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. Well, it's something we can't answer quite fully at this time, what all the types of mitigation services there might be or programs there might be.
Marcia, and I know that's something we'll be hearing a lot more about in the environmental review phase. We've been getting a number of questions and comments in the chat here, so I just want to acknowledge some of those. Devin is some agreement with Justin about future-proofing dock size for future potential ferries, such as a Olympic class, needs to be a priority. Thank you for that, Devin. And then it looks like Victoria had a question here about if the boats are running at full capacity currently, and John Vizina has provided a link there to our public dashboard that shows their performance by boat and route. So lots of information there. Really just those up on the chat. And Marty, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I just want to say that the explanation that David gave with the footprint was helpful, because I had also, persnickety questions about the ADA extra space needed, and the comments from the tag team about mitigation needing to be in Fauntleroy. And so I think a lot of the questions when I raised my hand, I have actually been covered. One question that I have is, it's going to be an incredible mess when you have no holding capacity and temporary docks and et cetera, whatever you build. One question is, with regard to number of boats, and the other is right-of-ways. So the number of boats is critical. Can we be on 3 boats scheduled before construction begins? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, there's different statements and areas that have been shaded that say potential right-of-ways, and I've never really understood what about those. I know that Cove Park is essentially landscaping on top of the King County pump station's necessary access to its outflow pipes. And those outflow pipes are in the construction zone, especially the temporary docks. There's other private lands that private owners have right-of-ways that go out 200 feet from mean high tide. And so just a question of whether any of that impacts your decisions. So can we get a 3 boat and talk to us a little bit more about what the right-of-way issues are?
Marty, so two questions there. We might call on you, John, but just wanted to highlight, I think Hadley mentioned at our last meeting that Washington State Ferries is just beginning an effort of looking at the triangle route schedule and considering some adjustments to the schedule. So I know that process is just getting underway. John might have a little bit more to say about that. So just pause there.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Marty. So I'm hoping as I age that I'm determined to hang on longer than two boat schedule. We are working really hard. You know, we've got the bonus boat now, and our vessels team is working really hard to get us back to the number of vessels that would allow us to restore three boat service. Obviously, it's key on this route that it needs to be 3 Issaquah class, and that's the current challenge, is having 3 124s available. So I am confident that before, long before this project starts, we'll be there. And then, this team that I keep in touch with through Hadley and David and Laura and others, we'll be working with, the community on options for how we provide service during that time. Obviously, those of you who are neighbors are key to that, with a major project in your backyard. So I am confident that we will have restored three boat service. I need to be honest and say, I'm not as confident that we can provide three boat service during this time, but we'll work with you on options to provide as much service as possible. And then just in general, we put out a COVID response plan, a service response plan last year. Earlier this year, we did a service contingency plan. We're about to start the update for that. The triangle is the next route for restoration. Nobody more than the people in this room want it to be back on regular service. And so we'll be updating the public early next year on, where we are with the full service restoration.
John and Dave, do you want to tackle that second question about property and right of way, and if that's part of the screening process?
Yeah, I didn't mean to sort of throw that term out there without some backup, Marty. So if you look at a city block, it's pretty easy to figure out where the lines of property lines are on a street, in a community, on a block. But when you go offshore, people's property limits, whether it's private property or it's the state's property, DNR's property, SDOT, City of Seattle's property, they leave the shoreline at all sorts of weird angles. And so we're very mindful that as this dock gets designed, that it needs to stay within the right of way that Washington State owns. And so when I was trying to answer Frank's question earlier about this design refinement that will happen, we've shown you 9 different versions of how the dock could look. As we narrow down on the Bs, there are some that flare out a little bit more or a little bit less, that are a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. We need to be cognizant of the right of way that's out in the water. You can't see it because there's no fence, but it exists. There's right of way in the water that isn't the state's. And so I have to be sensitive to that. And that was my comment, and a lot of explanation to point out that there are sort of invisible things that I also have to take into account as I'm laying out the dock and picking the width of the dock, so I can avoid and not have to worry about acquiring additional property. Does that help?
So Dave, it sounds like what you're saying is that that is something that we considered as we are looking at the alternatives and as part of the level 3 screening process.
It's an important part of how we're looking at this whole thing, and you can't see those lines in the sand because there is no fence. It's over water, but there are people owned to a certain extent out into that water, and we have to just maintain our footprint is on the state's in the state's jurisdictional area, not encroaching across that boundary.
Thank you very much, David. Just one more little question, and that's with regard to the King County Pump Station outflow pipes, and that
Right.
they are they have to be accessible instantly if there's a sewage overflow thing. So
Yep.
So does that mean that you always need to have that road that is Cove Park Road accessible, or what does it mean for any construction that you do out there?
Well, Ed Thomas is on the call. I don't know all back conversations that we had with King County, I'm going to assume that we have to maintain that road and the top of the pump station during construction, so that if they need to get out there and do anything, that they have access to it. But the county may have some, wiggle room for us. If, for example, we need to be setting on top of that lift station to do something overnight, or for a short duration, maybe we could do that because they don't have any planned maintenance. I don't know the depth of those conversations, but we'll certainly coordinate with the county. We don't want to cut off access to their facility and then suddenly there's a problem and they can't get to it. Just like, we're very cognizant of, the service disruptions because we have emergency vehicles that need to get to Vashon, and any kind of disruption to our service impacts those vehicles. So stuff happens, but by and large, we're going to try to minimize the temporary impact to the county.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ed, anything to add? I see you're on camera there.
No, David covered it very well. The one thing to add is the access walkway down to actual Cove Park Beach would be maintained during construction.
Okay.
Susan, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks so much. Well, thanks everyone for hosting us tonight. This has been really an interesting presentation. And I just wanted to concur with some of the folks in the chat that advocating for a dock that holds more than the 124 cars, mainly because this isn't just serving the one point and because it's serving two destinations. And we often have a boat going to Southworth just immediately followed by a boat to Vashon. So, it would work great just holding one boat capacity when there's just one destination. But with the two, it feels like having a little extra capacity on the dock would be really helpful to keep efficiency going. And also, I know this, maybe I've forgotten why this isn't being considered, but I just wanted to throw out the request that maybe as we move forward with planning, we consider having two berths at the end, just like they do on Vashon, to help also facilitate efficiency with serving two destinations. So thanks so much for hearing me out.
Yeah.
You want to respond to that?
Well, the second slip was never in the original scope, but what surfaced as we did the constructability reviews is that we will, that by all measures, no matter how you divide this up, no matter which option you pick, we need to have a second temporary slip so that we can build part of the structure and operate it, and then swap and move the traffic over to the new structure. And the only way to do that is to have a second slip off the end of the dock to the north. Like this view shows. But that is not something we're pursuing in our permitting process. It's not something that we see having permanency there. We do have a project at Southworth that is considering adding a second slip, and that's, the legislature is aware of that, but we have not forwarded that concept here. But we've heard it, Susan, throughout this process that folks have, and we've talked about it in terms of on-time performance and reliability and the ability to start to load while you're finishing another unload. Obviously Trevor is on the call and he knows the benefits of having two slips at any terminal, especially if something just, the slip's not working that day for some mechanical or electrical reason. So it's a good point. It's just not in the cards with the project the way it's scoped.
Dave. Appreciate everyone sticking with us. I know it's been a long meeting. I'm just making sure I'm with us. Any comments? Great.
You bet, Laura. Thank you. I don't know if you're looking to end the meeting. I imagine by the long pause, maybe that's the case. But David, you asked earlier about waiting options. Is that something that you are going to ask us about? Like, are we going to be able to provide that as far as waiting the criteria for, which is the most important to the group. You did ask for that earlier prior to your comment about the two options moving forward. I just didn't know if that was still something that you were looking for.
Well, I certainly would appreciate perspective on that. We intentionally did not, of all the screening criteria, assign weights to 1 through 10 or 1 through 20, and this one's more important than this one is more important than this one. We didn't do that. We didn't do that by design because everybody doesn't agree on what should be weighted the most. But the way the screening criteria was set up was that there's a number of operational criteria and there's a number of environmental criteria. And just by default, those tend to weigh out the other criteria because there's in this graphic, for example, there's 4 operational efficiency factors, but when it comes to Parks and Rec, there's only 1 criteria that we evaluated. So in that way, Frank, the operational efficiency and the nuances around that in scoring will dwarf the Parks and Rec criteria. But these were all things that through the purpose and need statement, and we've talked about this for several years now, were things that were important to the community, to the ridership. And so that's when we developed this. If you have any comments on how this was developed, certainly happy to take that feedback. When I made my weighting comment, it was more in terms of how we assigned the greens and the light green, the dark green, and the white to this amount of square footage of overwater coverage or this amount of minutes of savings of time, and where we tried to draw lines between 20 minutes and 15 minutes. And I'd like some feedback there if you think that those were could be improved upon, or if you have a different perspective on that. Sometimes it's hard to separate things that just vary in the shade of gray, if you will, versus more yes or no. So that kind of input would be helpful. Any input is helpful and would feed this process.
I'm sorry, am I correct that there's a second page to this key criteria results as well?
So there were 3 pages at the beginning of the presentation with all of the criteria all of the screening criteria. There it is. But what we did in that last sheet, Frank, is we took off the criteria where they were all the same color. So for example, on the structural resiliency and sea level rise, every single alternative is going to be designed to the latest standard. So we didn't put that in the last sheet because everybody's going to be a solid green. If there was any difference between the alternatives and it showed up in this colored, then we put it on this last sheet. So that's why there's just this one. We call it the summary of the key criteria. It's not to take away from all the other criteria.
Okay, thank you very much.
Marty?
In the tag meeting, there was a discussion of the intersection, and do we have any time to talk about that tonight, or is that something just maybe send to the Fauntleroy Terminal Project questions?
Well, Charlie Torres is on the call. He's the project manager for that. Charlie, do you want to just kind of
yeah, I just had a couple of questions of it. When we were first discussing it in meetings long ago, we as all 3 communities wanted to know who to contact if there were problems. Fauntleroy was concerned about the length of the traffic light and pedestrian island and pedestrian usage of the buttons. And for the commuting communities, they were concerned about the use, how do they report and what do they do with the line cutters? And that will be important, especially during the construction period. And also there was a question about motorcycles and bicycles and how they access their lane safely. So those were the three questions I can remember. Frank, maybe you have some others, but just some more input on that. Who to contact? How do the motorcycles get there? What do we do about the line cutters?
But that's a lot to process. And it looks like Charlie jumped off the call. Nope, there he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot, but I might need someone to rescue me.
I got your back, Charlie.
Let me just first say that our consultant, Jacobs Engineering, has started that design. We do what's called a 30% level of design, and then we review it. Then we get to 60%, 90%, and then final. We just at Thanksgiving, we submitted the 30%. So just today I was reviewing those specifications and drawings. They're very preliminary. We still haven't done any borings to study the soils there. Our goal is to next summer advertise the project, which will be pole, curbs, striping, that, but not the timing. The timing, we're partnered with SDOT, and they will be the owners they are the owners of this intersection, and they will be owning everything we build out there. So we're designing it to their design criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked to them about, we're going to have times where we're going to change this thing during construction. It won't be one setting during the entire construction period. It's going to change, and we're going to need to make those changes. I don't have the person, an individual right now to talk to about that, but we anticipate when we have limited service during construction, we're going to have one type of signalization system. And then when it's all running full speed ahead, we'll have another one. But as we've learned at Coleman and Mukilteo, you have to tweak this thing, not for 6 months or for 12 months. You just tweak it a lot to get it right. It's designers, they really do their best, but we get comments and we get out there and we start tweaking the timing to get it appropriate, to balance it for the greater good.
Yeah, so that's exactly why I asked who to contact. So that it must be an SDOT person, I guess. But that needs to be, how can they know what's wrong if they're not hearing from people with boots on the ground?
Right. In our meetings with them, we're kind of educating them on how the pulses of traffic come off of the ferry. It's not like going to Costco or other intersections. So we're gonna partner with them. We're gonna help them out, let them know where our peaks are, and come up with something. And there will be somebody that you can reach out to and submit your comments. I just don't know who that person is today.
Yeah, thank you. So there will be someone, and that will be someone with WSDOT or someone with SDOT?
I'm sorry, SDOT. Oh, I bet
all SDOT. Yeah. Okay.
And we're going to partner with them. Trevor will be talking to them all the time.
And Marty, I reach out to SDOT, their traffic management center now when I have issues at Coleman and stuff, and that's who we go through as the traffic management center.
And Marty, just to reinforce what people are saying, we opened the Mukilteo terminal 3 years ago, and I'm still working with the city and with WSDOT Olympic region because or Northwest region, because that's our road there. But we're not going away. There will definitely be. Just a couple months ago, we flew drones over to look at how the traffic patterns were going, and we made tweaks to address the pedestrian crossing times. So we'll work closely with our SDOT colleagues to address any community concerns. And if you're not hearing from them, you can find us and we'll hear from them. But we know this is a big deal and that people have really cooperated on it, so we want to make it work as best as possible.
Thank you.
Marty, you also, I took some notes here, had some comments on bicycles, motorcycles, and line cutters.
Yeah, so the new lane with the bicycles and the motorcycles going through, and they will be accessing it through the standard traffic lane, not the queue, and then weaving in, and And that's been a question that people have questioned and wondered how that will be done safely. And so that I'm sure you've thought about that.
We've thought about it. I think I want to defer to my I like how Marcia answered some of the questions, that we're in this planning phase now. So we haven't, I hate to just call it a detail because it's such an important detail, but it's something that we all are going to work on and see, are we doing this correctly? I know at Mukilteo we had to worry about, are we inadvertently creating a skateboard park when we don't want a skateboard park? But we went through in design to just make sure that we didn't by accident do something that had some unintended consequence we weren't happy with. But I think the things you're talking about are going to happen in this next chapter. And maybe stay tuned.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And for line cutters, I need a lot of help to figure out what to do with line cutters.
Honestly, I would hope that we could use that officer to start controlling that line, but like we said, it's all a process.
Oh.
Yeah, I lost my connection there for a moment, but I am back. And I see more hands raised. So, Anne, we haven't heard from you yet.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the presentation. It's great to see it moving closer to a final decision. A little bit of a dovetail on the comments that Marty just was asking about the traffic light, and that was that when I saw that you were recommending somewhere between 124 and 140 or 155 cars potentially for the dock, my thought was whatever cars are not handled on the dock need to be handled on the street. And so I know that you work with SDOT all the time. I know that you're aware of all of the issues that come up. But, so I spend a lot of time getting out of my car, kindly explaining to people that they have cut in the line, and they don't know that they've cut in the line. So many of them, some of them do it intentionally, but a lot of them really don't know because it's not clear where the line is. It's not clear from signage what's going on. It's just really hard for people to figure it out. So I just want to make sure that as the final numbers on that dock are determined, that you look really carefully at how those cars are going to be managed on the street, and make sure that there are additional measures taken so that we don't have the same situation that we have now, which is conflict, confusion, and a long idles on Fauntleroy Way. So thank you.
And I know we've heard this from many folks over the years, and I recall Justin brought this up in our last meeting. So certainly something to continue to consider carefully as we moving forward. David. Your question, David?
Yes, hi, sorry, trying to unmute. This goes back to the intersection, and I've raised this question before. So it sounds that we have Jacobs Engineering working on this design of the intersection now. And one of the comments that one of the things I'm really concerned is about the view from Captain's Park being blocked by these signals. So would it be possible to have them do a rendering of what the traffic signals will look like from Captain's Park so that the community can look at that and see how it impacts the park? Because the Captain's Park, one of the important things is the view out over the terminal and out over the water. So I think that's an important thing to take a look at right now, so we can start considering that. And it shouldn't be that hard to do.
Right. Now, David, we can do that. Yeah, we don't know if it's a pole 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet. How high is the bluff? I think we can do that and show you what it would look like.
Oh, it should be very easy to do with today's technologies. So, okay, good.
They love it when I ask if they can do a new rendering to show us a different viewpoint. So
Well, this is very important for the
It
neighborhood.
is.
So
It's, yeah, very important. And I see Ed is on camera there.
I just wanted to point out that internally we've initiated discussions to start that effort
good.
that we will share with Washington State Ferries, and we'll pick a time to be able to share that with you folks.
Well, I think the whole community needs to see that as well.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, we're trying to bring up the points that are important, and I think this is a very important aspect of the traffic signal affecting the park, which is a really nice feature in this neighborhood. So thank you very much for your consideration on this.
Thanks, David. Great comment. Frank?
I had just a point of maybe clarification for David's comment. And David, I was at the park the other day and I was thinking exactly that question. And one thing I noticed, and maybe Charlie or Ed, you guys can help, is the traffic signal typically higher than or equal to or in relationship to a standard street light? Does it have any kind of bearing? Is that a kind of an example of how high it may be?
Maybe Ed or Mark can help me out.
Yeah, I was wondering if Mark might be able to.
Yeah. Frank, the what's called the mast arm where the signal displays would be, that is typically lower than where a street light is. So if you use that as a relative difference, basically the bottom of the signal poles, as you imagine, you want to be higher than a vehicle that's legally allowed on the street. That's basically legal height of a vehicle is 14 feet. So you give a couple feet of buffer in case somebody wants to move through or somebody bounces. So signal displays bottom will be 16 feet. That puts the mast arm at about say 18, 19, 20-ish feet. And a luminaire pole or a street light will, unless it's if it's for lighting a street, will often be in the 30-foot height range above the roadway. If it's like a pedestrian light, like you see at the Metro bus stop out there, those tend to be more in the 15-foot height range.
Okay, I was going to suggest that there's the light pole right there. Maybe we could use that as some kind of an indicator.
And you'll see this when we get the rendering, when that Ed and team get the rendering done. But if you want to go out there today and kind of just change it, it's not going to be higher than that street light itself.
Okay.
Unless if it's the one I'm thinking of that's lighting the street, it shouldn't be higher than that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Let's take the other hands raised. So move us on to our final slide, which is our next steps. So we are, as Dave mentioned at the beginning, nearing the end of the Pell process, but we do have some near-term next steps. We will be continuing community and tribal engagement as we finalize the Pell study report. And then working with our federal partners who will confirm the alternative and identify a level of environmental review before we begin that NEPA-CEPA environmental review process. So I again appreciate all of the feedback this evening and conversations over the last multiple meetings and getting to this point. Certainly a lot for us to take into account as we are working through this information. Dave, I think with that, we're ready to close off the meeting. Any final remarks?
Well, it looks like Frank had his hand shut out before I got a chance to say anything. So go ahead, Frank.
I apologize, guys. I'm sorry for taking up so much time. But I did want to ask a question. With Laura, what you just put up, is this the end of the community engagement portion then?
No.
Nope.
Okay.
We'll be continuing on. So yes, and we are going to be working to put together the Pell study report. So the slide at the very beginning kind of talked about our upcoming CAG meetings, but our next CAG meeting we'll be talking about the draft Pell report. So more to come.
Yeah, Frank, we do need to reach out to the broader community. And I think I had the same comment when I saw the slide. There is a conversation that we need to have with like an open house with the broader community as well. not just the two advisory groups. So that's part of what's coming up next, as well as a executive advisory group meeting probably in January with electeds and other agency directors. So those are some other things that are coming, but then there'll be another CAG to follow. So with that, I know it's been a long 2 hours. I want to thank everybody for being here and for enduring through this whole process to get us to this point. It's been a lot of effort, and I hope that most of you, if not all of you, respect that the process has been followed, and we've taken input. And again, as I use the term Goldilocks, try to find a solution that's not too hard, not too soft, not too big, not too small. And I think that this version of what we'd like to take into NEPA could fit that. So I want everybody to have a wonderful Christmas, happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thanks, everybody.
And
See you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Happy
everybody.
holidays, everybody.
Right,
Bye-bye.